My name is Gina. I am 65 years old, and I never imagined that the people I loved most would be the ones to hurt me the deepest. I raised my son Michael with all the love I had, but that same boy, the one I fed, clothed, and prayed for, forged my signature to steal the house I had worked my whole life to build, my beautiful beach house in Florida. And that is how I ended up at his housewarming party, dressed in my best navy blue dress, clutching a small purse. At my side stood my plus one, a man nobody expected me to bring, Mr. Hunter, the real estate lawyer who had been secretly recording every single phone call I'd had with Michael about the so-called transfer of ownership. As Michael raised his champagne glass to toast his new beginnings, I smiled. He thought this was his victory party. He thought he had won. But the moment Hunter cleared his throat, every guest in that living room went silent. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my voice stayed calm as I said, "Michael, before you thank everyone for coming tonight, I think you should hear what your lawyer has to say." And right there in front of Michael's friends, his new neighbors, and even his wife Faith, the lawyer pressed play on his phone. A familiar voice filled the air. It was Michael's, nervous and desperate, confessing over the phone how he forged my signature and how he thought no one would ever find out. The glass slipped from Michael's hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. But that wasn't the real shock of the night. Because what happened next? Well, let's just say even I didn't see it coming. Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Let me know where you are watching from. Drop your city or state in the comments. You never know, you might be lucky enough to get a shout out in the next story. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe if you love stories about betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. I was born and raised in Georgia, and for as long as I could remember, I had two dreams: to raise a good family and to one day own a house by the beach. Life wasn't easy for me. I was widowed young when my husband Daniel died of a heart attack, leaving me to raise Michael alone. People told me I'd fall apart, but I didn't. I pulled myself together, worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, and pinched every penny until, after 20 years, I finally bought that little beach house in Florida. That house was my pride. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I painted the walls myself, planted roses in the front, and spent my weekends walking barefoot in the sand. Sometimes my granddaughter Princess would visit, and we'd build sand castles and watch the sunset. Those were my happiest days. But happiness doesn't last forever. Michael had always been ambitious, but somewhere along the way, ambition turned into greed. When he married Faith, things got worse. She was beautiful, smart, and sharp-tongued. She often looked at me like I was just an obstacle in their life, a woman holding on to assets that she thought should belong to them. At family dinners, she'd joke about how one day, that beach house will finally be ours. She said it with a smile, but her eyes never smiled. At first, I brushed it off. People say all kinds of things when they're young and impatient. But then Michael lost his job. Bills piled up. Faith wanted a bigger lifestyle than Michael could afford. They started dropping hints. "Mom, maybe you should let us use the beach house. You don't need it all the time." I told them no, kindly but firmly. That house was my peace, my dream, my reward after years of struggle. Then one morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the county clerk's office, confirming the transfer of ownership of my beach house to Michael. At first, I thought it was a mistake. My hand shook as I reread the letter, over and over. But it was no mistake. My son had forged my signature. My son had stolen from me. The heartbreak was unbearable. I cried so hard that night I thought my chest would break. How could the boy I raised do this to me? How could he rob me of the one thing that brought me peace? I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was crushed. And then something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Now, before I go further, let me pause for a second. If you are sitting there thinking, "I would never betray my mother like that," then I want you to do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because stories like mine prove one thing: family doesn't always mean loyalty. And if you don't subscribe, maybe you're the kind of person who would steal from your own mama. You don't want people to think that about you, do you? So I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew I could trust, Hunter, an old family friend and real estate lawyer. I told him everything, my voice shaking. He listened quietly. And then he said something that changed everything. Gina, don't panic. Let's build a case. But we'll need proof, solid proof. Proof. That word burned in my mind. So we began recording every conversation. Every call Michael made to me, every promise, every slip of the tongue, we had it all. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth started stacking up against him. But I didn't confront him yet. Oh no, I stayed silent. I even smiled when he invited me to his housewarming party at the stolen beach house. He thought I was too old, too soft, too broken to fight back. He had no idea. That night, I walked into the house that used to be mine, holding my purse tightly, Hunter walking beside me. My heart pounded like a drum. Michael's face lit up when he saw me, as if my presence was his final stamp of victory. But I wasn't there to congratulate him. And as Hunter pressed play on those recordings, the walls of Michael's new kingdom began to crumble. The look on his face was priceless. Fear, shame, panic all twisted together. Faith grabbed his arm, demanding to know what was going on. Guests looked around uncomfortably, whispers spreading like wildfire. And just when I thought I had seen it all, something happened that nobody in that room will ever forget. The silence in the room after the recording played was heavier than the ocean outside those windows. You could almost hear the waves crashing against the shore in the distance, but no one inside dared to move. Michael's face turned pale, and he kept shaking his head like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. That's not me, he stammered, his voice trembling. That's not my voice. But everyone knew it was him. Faith narrowed her eyes, her hand still gripping his arm tightly. Michael, she whispered harshly, loud enough for people nearby to hear. What did you do? Hunter stood calmly, his phone still in his hand. There's more, he said, his voice steady. Much more. Michael lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone, but Hunter slipped it back into his jacket pocket with practiced ease. The lawyer had seen desperate men before. He wasn't about to be intimidated tonight. The guests started whispering louder. Some shifted uncomfortably, clutching their drinks, wondering if they should leave. Others stayed rooted, hungry for the drama, eager to see the fireworks unfold. I just stood there, my hands folded in front of me. My heart was beating fast, but my face was calm. For once, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt strong. Michael turned toward me, his eyes wild. Mom, why are you doing this? You're ruining my life. Ruining your life? I said quietly, my voice trembling with both pain and strength. Michael, you forged my name. You stole my home. And now you want to play the victim. Faith gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. She looked like she had just seen her entire world collapse in front of her. But was she truly shocked, or was this just an act? I couldn't tell yet. That was the low moment, the heartbreak, the weight of betrayal heavy in the air. But then, the night took a sharp turn, because Hunter didn't stop there. He pulled out a small black folder from his bag, the kind lawyers always carry, and laid it on the coffee table. This, he announced, is every document, every forged paper, every recording tied to this fraud. And it doesn't just stop at the house. The room gasped. Heads turned. Eyes widened. What do you mean? Faith asked, her voice shaky. Hunter looked straight at her. Your husband has been making other deals too. Bad ones. Using your name, your credit, your future. Faith's face went white as a sheet. She stumbled back, nearly dropping her glass. Guests started murmuring even louder now, like bees buzzing in a hive. Some of them even pulled out their phones, pretending to text, but really recording the entire thing. Michael tried to laugh it off, but it came out strained and bitter. This is all lies. He's trying to turn my own mother against me. But the truth was already out, and everyone could see it. Now, pause with me for a second. If you're sitting there watching this and thinking, if my own child ever betrayed me like that, I don't know what I'd do, then ask yourself this. Why haven't you subscribed yet? Because if you don't, you might never hear the end of this story, and trust me, you need to hear it. Don't be the person who gets left out when justice is served. Hit that button now. The tension in that living room was unbearable. Faith was crying now, tears running down her cheeks. She kept saying, "Tell me it's not true, Michael. Tell me it's not true." But Michael stayed silent, his jaw clenched, his pride collapsing in front of everyone. I could have ended it there. I could have walked out, satisfied with the truth being revealed. But life doesn't always give us neat endings. Sometimes it pushes the knife in deeper. Because just as Hunter started gathering his papers, the front door suddenly swung open. And standing there was someone I never expected to see. Someone whose presence made every jaw in the room drop. Someone who had the power to either save Michael or destroy him completely. The door creaked open, and the sound echoed through the tense silence of the room. Everyone turned, their eyes wide, their breaths held, and then she walked in, Princess, my sweet granddaughter. Only she wasn't the little girl who used to build sandcastles with me anymore. She was grown now, a young woman with fire in her eyes and determination in every step. She walked straight into the lion's den, her chin high, her voice sharp. Dad, she said, her eyes locked on Michael, tell them the truth. The room erupted in whispers. People shifted, some gasping, some leaning forward as if they were watching a movie. Fate's mascara was smeared from crying. Michael's face turned red with anger, and I couldn't breathe. My own granddaughter had stepped into this storm, and I didn't know if it was to shield me or to defend him. Michael's voice cracked. Princess, what are you doing here? This is none of your business. But she didn't back down. It is my business, she snapped. You used my name on those bank papers, too. You thought I wouldn't find out? I know everything, Dad. Everything. The room froze. Fate's eyes shot open wide as she turned to face her husband. What? She hissed. Michael stuttered, his words falling apart before they even left his mouth. It wasn't like that. I just needed time. Princess's voice broke then, anger mixing with pain. Time for what? To ruin me? To destroy Grandma? To make sure you look good while everyone else suffers? That was the high of the moment, raw, unexpected, and cutting like a knife. And then came the low. Tears welled up in her eyes. She looked at me and my heart shattered. Grandma, I didn't know at first. I thought he was just trying to fix things for us. But when I found the papers, I realized he used my identity, too. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. My granddaughter, caught in the middle of a mess her father created. The betrayal had spread like poison, touching everyone. I reached for her, pulling her into my arms. For a moment, it felt like it was just me and her again, like those days on the beach when life was simple, when love was enough. I stroked her hair and whispered, It's not your fault, baby. None of this is your fault. But even as I held her, I could feel Michael's eyes burning into me. His shame had turned into anger. He was cornered, and cornered men do dangerous things. Before I could say another word, Michael slammed his fist against the wall, the sound jolting everyone in the room. Enough, he shouted. I'm not going to stand here and let you all destroy me. This is my house now. Mine. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep it. Guests gasped. Faith backed away slowly, her face twisted in horror. But Michael wasn't finished. His chest rose and fell with rage as he reached into his jacket pocket, and what he pulled out made the entire room scream. Michael's hand trembled as he pulled something from his jacket pocket. For a split second, the room froze, breaths caught in every chest, as if the air itself refused to move. It wasn't a gun. It was a stack of papers, crumpled, smudged, and folded as if they had been shoved in there in a hurry. He waved them wildly in the air. These are the real documents, he shouted. I'm the rightful owner of this house. I don't care what recordings you think you have. I have proof. This is mine. Some guests flinched. Some sighed with relief that it wasn't a weapon, but the tension didn't die down. It shifted, because everyone knew papers could be just as deadly as bullets in situations like this. Hunter adjusted his glasses calmly. You mean those papers you forged? The ones already under investigation. Michael's face twisted, his desperation turning into something darker. He turned toward the guests, waving the papers like a flag. Don't listen to them. This is all lies. My mother is trying to humiliate me. She's always been against me. She never wanted me to succeed. The low hit me then, his words cut deeper than he realized. Always against him? I raised that boy alone, sacrificed my youth, worked double shifts to put food in his mouth. And now he was telling strangers I had been his enemy all along. My chest ached, but I stayed still. I refused to let him see me break. Princess broke the silence. Her voice was steady this time. Dad, stop lying. I've seen the emails. I know the truth. Fate's voice joined in, sharp and accusing. So have I. You dragged me into this, Michael. You made me believe we were starting fresh. But all of this, she pointed at the house around us, is stolen. Nothing here is ours. Gasps rippled through the guests again. The walls felt like they were closing in. Michael's face burned red, sweat dripping from his forehead. He was losing control of the room, and he knew it. And then came the high, something I never expected to hear. Hunter leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm, each word like a hammer striking nails into a coffin. Michael, you should know something. That phone call you made last week, the one where you admitted to forging not only your mother's signature, but also your daughter's identity, that call wasn't just recorded. Michael's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Hunter's lips curved into a cold, knowing smile. It was live-streamed. The room erupted. People gasped. Faith covered her mouth with her hands. Princess looked at me in shock. And Michael's knees buckled as if the floor had been ripped out from under him. What do you mean, live-streamed? He stammered. Hunter didn't answer right away. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again, clicking something on the screen. The sound of Michael's voice, panicked, guilty, undeniable, filled the room once more. Only this time, it wasn't just the people in that living room who had heard it. The truth was already out there. Michael's hand shook violently. He dropped the papers to the ground, his whole body trembling. He knew he was finished. But just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, it did. Because suddenly, from outside, we all heard the unmistakable wail of sirens growing louder. They were coming straight for the house. The sound of police sirens grew louder, cutting through the salty night air. Red and blue lights flashed against the windows, painting the walls of the living room in streaks of warning. The guests panicked. Some set their drinks down hurriedly. Others whispered frantically about whether they should leave. Nobody wanted to be caught in the middle of what was unfolding. Michael's eyes widened with terror. He stumbled backward, his face pale. No, this can't be happening. You didn't call them, did you? Hunter slipped his phone back into his pocket, his voice steady as stone. I didn't have to. They've been following your trail for weeks. Tonight was just the final piece. The room fell into chaos. Some guests rushed toward the door, while others pulled out their phones to film. Faith clutched her chest, whispering prayers under her breath, and Princess stood frozen, staring at her father with tears brimming in her eyes. For me, it was a low moment. Watching my son, the boy I once held in my arms, the boy I once believed could do no wrong, about to be dragged into handcuffs. My heart ached, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Not after what he'd done. Then the knock came, loud, commanding, unmistakable. Police, open up. Michael panicked. He darted toward the back of the house, shoving past guests who yelped in surprise. I'm not going to jail, he shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. Nobody's taking me away. Faith screamed, Michael, stop. But he didn't listen. Hunter gave me a sharp look, then moved toward the officers, who were already coming in through the front. Two uniformed men stepped inside, their expressions firm. We have a warrant for Michael Turner, one of them announced. That was the high. The moment everyone realized there was no more hiding, no more lies. It was real. The law had arrived. But Michael wasn't about to surrender. He bolted toward the back door, shoving over a lamp and nearly knocking a guest off their feet. Princess cried out, Dad, please, but he didn't turn back. His pride, his fear, his greed, they all pushed him forward. The officers chased him, shouting, Stop right there. The house exploded into chaos, screaming, glass breaking, people rushing out of the way. I stood frozen, clutching Princess tightly, my heart hammering like a drum. Then, as Michael flung open the back door, another shadow stepped inside. It wasn't an officer. It wasn't a guest. It was someone from Michael's past, someone none of us had seen in years, someone whose presence made even the officers stop dead in their tracks. And when Michael's eyes locked on that figure, his face drained of every last drop of color. The figure stepped into the doorway, the porch light casting a shadow across his face. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The officers froze mid-step. Hunter stiffened. Faith clutched her mouth, and Princess whispered a single word that cut the air like a knife. Daniel. My knees went weak. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. My late husband's name slipped from my granddaughter's lips, and I couldn't breathe. But as the figure moved closer, the truth became clear. It wasn't my Daniel, it was his younger brother, Samuel, a man we hadn't seen in almost 20 years. The resemblance was striking. The same sharp jawline, the same piercing eyes, the same intimidating presence. For a split second, even Michael faltered, his body going rigid with shock. Uncle, Michael croaked, his voice shaking. Samuel's voice boomed, steady and cold. Michael Turner, what have you done? The room fell into stunned silence. Guests, officers, and even Hunter stood frozen as Samuel walked further inside. He wasn't just some estranged uncle making a dramatic return. He was dressed in a tailored suit, carrying a briefcase, and his words carried weight. Faith's jaw dropped. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice trembling. Samuel set his briefcase on the table and looked directly at me. I came because Gina asked for help months ago. She didn't know if she could trust anyone else. So I started digging. And what I found, he looked back at Michael, his eyes burning with disappointment, was worse than anything I imagined. That was the high of the moment, the twist nobody expected. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He had tangled himself in webs Samuel had been quietly unraveling for weeks. Michael's face contorted with rage. You had no right. This has nothing to do with you. But Samuel stood firm. It has everything to do with me. Your father would be ashamed of you. And you know it. The low hit me then, deep and sharp. Hearing Daniel's name, imagining what he would think if he were alive, made my heart ache. I fought tears, clutching Princess's hand tightly. The officers exchanged glances. Sir, if you have evidence, we'll need it now. Samuel opened his briefcase and began pulling out documents, bank statements, forged contracts, even screenshots of shady transfers. Each paper landed on the table like a hammer striking the truth deeper and deeper. The guests leaned in, whispering, stunned that this night had gone from a party to a courtroom drama. Michael's voice cracked. No, you can't do this to me. But Samuel didn't flinch. He looked him dead in the eyes. You did this to yourself. Michael stumbled backward, his back hitting the wall. His eyes darted wildly, looking for an escape. He was trapped, cornered from every side, by the law, by the truth, by his own family. And then came the cliffhanger. Because just as one of the officers stepped forward to place Michael under arrest, the power in the entire house suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Guests screamed. Glass shattered. Someone shouted for a flashlight. And in that split second of confusion, Michael vanished. The entire house plunged into darkness. The soft glow of cell phone screens flickered as guests scrambled, their voices rising in panic. Some cursed, others screamed, and a few shouted Michael's name. The air was thick with fear and confusion. I held Princess close, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break through my chest. Stay with me, I whispered, though my own voice shook. Hunter pulled out his phone flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. The beam caught overturned glasses, a broken lamp, and frightened faces, but not Michael. He's gone, Samuel muttered, his voice low but steady. One of the officers barked orders. Check the back. Secure the exits. He can't have gotten far. Their footsteps pounded through the house as they fanned out in search of him. Faith, still shaking, clung to the edge of a chair. He wouldn't just run. He wouldn't leave me, her words broke into a sob. She buried her face in her hands. The low of the moment sank into me like a knife. My son had not only betrayed me, but also abandoned his wife and child in his desperation. The boy I had raised was gone, swallowed by greed and fear, and I didn't know if there was any piece of him left worth saving. Samuel steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. Don't break now, Gina. This isn't over. We'll get him. Hunter's flashlight beam caught something near the window. A curtain swayed, half torn from its rod, and beneath it lay the crumpled papers Michael had dropped earlier. Proof of his desperation. Proof of his crime. The guests whispered frantically. Did he escape through the window? Is he armed? Should we even be here? The officers regrouped, their radios crackling. One of them spoke firmly. We'll find him. He's still close. Houses like this don't have many places to hide. And then came the high, the moment that made every hair on the back of my neck stand. Because just as an officer opened the sliding door to the patio, the beam of his flashlight caught something outside. A fresh trail of wet footprints, leading away from the house and into the darkness of the beach. The officer called out, "We've got movement," and rushed outside. Another followed quickly. Everyone else stayed frozen, the sound of the ocean crashing in the distance filling the silence. Princess clutched my arm tighter. "Grandma, what if he runs into the water? What if he—" Her voice broke, too afraid to finish. I hugged her close, trying to calm her, though my own heart was trembling. Faith suddenly rose to her feet, tears streaming down her face. "I have to find him," she cried. "He's my husband." She darted toward the back door before anyone could stop her. "Faith, don't," Samuel shouted. But it was too late. She had already disappeared into the night. The guests gasped. The officers yelled. And in that moment of chaos, the most chilling sound reached us through the darkness. A scream. Faith's scream. The scream cut through the night like a blade. Every muscle in my body froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then everyone rushed toward the patio door at once. "Faith!" Princess cried, her voice breaking as she tried to run ahead. I grabbed her arm tight. "Stay with me," I said, terrified of losing her in the chaos. The officers were the first to reach the beach. Their flashlights swept across the sand, beams slicing through the darkness. The rest of us crowded behind, our shoes sinking into the cold grains as the ocean roared. Then we saw her. Faith was on her knees near the waterline, her dress soaked, her hands digging desperately into the sand. Her sobs were almost drowned by the waves, but we could hear her crying out over and over, "Michael! Michael!" One of the officers rushed to her side. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "Where is he?" She pointed toward the waves, her face pale and streaked with tears. "He ran out there. He just went into the water." The crowd gasped. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. The low of the night hit me like a storm. My son, my only child, running into the black ocean as if he'd rather drown than face the truth. The sight of his wife, broken on her knees in the sand, clawed at my heart. No mother should ever witness this. Samuel's voice was calm but grim. "The tide's strong tonight. If he went in, he won't last long." Faith shook her head wildly. "No, he's a good swimmer. He can make it back. He'll come back." Her words were frantic, her denial as deep as her love. Hunter stood beside me, his jaw tight. Or maybe he didn't run into the water at all. Maybe that's just what he wanted us to think. The officers exchanged looks. One spoke into his radio, calling for backup and a search team. Another kept his flashlight fixed on the rolling waves, waiting, watching. For a long, terrible minute, all we heard was the crash of the surf and Faith's sobs. The guests huddled together, whispering, some already pulling out their phones to record, others shaking their heads in disbelief. And then came the high, an electrifying jolt that made every nerve in my body spark. Because out of the corner of Hunter's flashlight beam, near the dunes, a shadow moved. It wasn't the waves. It wasn't the wind. It was a man, crawling low in the sand, trying to slip away unnoticed. "Over there," one of the officers shouted. The beams turned. The crowd gasped. Faith whipped her head toward the dunes. And there he was, Michael, covered in sand, his clothes soaked, his face wild with desperation. He had tricked us. He hadn't gone into the water at all. He was trying to escape. The officers sprinted toward him, their radios crackling with urgency. But before they reached him, Michael did something that froze every drop of blood in my veins. He pulled something metallic from his waistband, and the flash of it under the moonlight made the entire beach erupt in screams. The moonlight glinted off the object in Michael's hand, and a collective gasp rippled across the beach. At first glance, it looked like a gun. Several guests screamed and stumbled back, shielding themselves behind others. Princess clutched my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. "Dad, no," she cried. But as the officers' flashlights fixed on him, the truth became clear. It wasn't a gun, it was a flare gun. Michael held it shakily, his face twisted with rage and fear. "Stay back," he shouted, waving it wildly. "I swear I'll fire it." The officers froze, their hands hovering near their weapons. "Michael, put it down," one commanded. "That thing could set the dunes on fire. You'll hurt everyone here." Hunter muttered under his breath. Desperate men and desperate choices. The low hit me hard. I was staring at the boy I had raised, reduced to this. A flare gun in his hand, his back against the dunes. No sense of reason left in his eyes. He looked more like a cornered animal than my son. And I couldn't help but wonder, was there any way back for him? Faith stumbled forward, tears running down her cheeks. "Michael, please. Stop this. You don't have to do this. Don't come closer," he barked, his voice cracking. His hand trembled, finger hovering over the trigger. "They're all against me. Even you, Faith. You too." The officers inched closer. One whispered to the other, "If he fires that, this whole area could ignite. We need to end this quick." And then came the high, the moment everything exploded into chaos. Michael pulled the trigger. The flare shot into the air with a deafening whoosh, streaking red light across the night sky. It wasn't pointed at anyone, but it was enough to make the crowd scatter in terror. People screamed, running back toward the house, while others fell to the sand, trying to shield themselves. The flare arched, then plummeted into the dry brush at the edge of the dunes. Within seconds, flames licked upward, crackling and spitting as the wind fed them. "Fire!" someone shouted. The officers lunged at Michael, but he swung the empty flare gun wildly, screaming, "You'll never take me alive." The fire began to spread rapidly, the heat pushing back the crowd. Faith shrieked, covering her face. Princess clung to me, sobbing. The guests were in full panic now, some rushing to their cars, others shouting for water or sand to put the flames out. The beach party had turned into a nightmare. And then the cliffhanger struck like lightning. Because as the flames roared higher, illuminating the dunes in a fiery glow, Michael turned suddenly and grabbed someone out of the crowd. He pressed the empty flare gun against their head, using them as a shield. And when I saw who it was, my blood turned to ice. He had taken Princess. The world stopped moving the second I saw Michael's arm wrapped around Princess. Her small frame shook violently as he yanked her back against his chest, pressing the empty flare gun to her temple like it was a loaded weapon. "Stay back or she's gone," Michael shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Michael!" I screamed, my throat tearing with every syllable. My granddaughter's wide, terrified eyes locked on mine, pleading silently for help. My knees buckled under the weight of it, but Hunter caught me before I collapsed. Faith collapsed into the sand, sobbing. "Not Princess. Please, not Princess. Michael, she's just a child." The officers raised their hands, trying to calm him. One of them stepped forward cautiously. "Michael, listen to me. That flare gun won't hurt her now. You're scaring your family. Let her go before this gets worse." Michael's grip tightened. His face was a twisted mask of rage and sorrow. "You don't understand. None of you ever understood me. She's the only one who still looks at me without hate. And now you're turning her against me too." Princess whimpered, her tiny hands gripping at his arm, her tears wetting his sleeve. I wanted to tear her away, to hold her, to promise her everything would be okay. But my feet wouldn't move. Every step could push him over the edge. The low hit me like a blade in my heart. This was my son, holding my granddaughter hostage in front of the world. Every guest, every officer, even strangers recording on their phones were watching my family unravel in flames. "Michael, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "She's innocent. She loves you. Don't hurt her. Let me take her place if you must. Please, not her." For a moment, his eyes softened. He looked at me, not as an enemy, not as a mother who had turned against him, but as the woman who once held him as a boy, the woman who kissed his scraped knees and sang him to sleep. And then, the high, an eruption that sent the beach into chaos once more. The fire had grown monstrous, the flames whipping higher with the wind. The heat blasted against us, and embers rained down like sparks from the heavens. One landed on the wooden fence near the house, igniting it instantly. Screams rose as guests scrambled, realizing the fire could consume the property within minutes. "Everyone back!" an officer shouted. But Michael stood rooted, clutching Princess as if she were the only thing keeping him from collapsing completely. His eyes darted between the fire, the officers, and me. His breathing grew ragged. And then he made his move. With a roar, he dragged Princess backward toward the dunes, away from the officers, away from the fire. She stumbled and cried, but he yanked her along, half carrying, half dragging her through the sand. I screamed her name, my voice shattering into the night. Hunter and Faith both surged forward, but the officers held them back. "Wait, he's unstable." But my heart knew something they didn't. I could feel it in my bones, in that unshakable bond only a mother has. Michael wasn't running to escape. He was dragging Princess somewhere. Somewhere planned. And when the officers' flashlights cut across the dunes, we all saw it at once, half buried under a tarp and brush, hidden from plain sight. It was a small boat. Michael was heading straight for it with Princess in his grip. The sight of the boat was like a punch to the chest. A small motorboat hidden under a tarp, pulled halfway up the sand as though he'd been planning this for weeks. The crowd gasped in unison, and my heart nearly stopped. "He had an escape planned," Hunter muttered, his voice low and furious. He wasn't just panicking. He knew exactly what he'd do if cornered. Michael dragged Princess toward the boat, her sobs cutting through the roar of the fire behind us. She stumbled, but he yanked her upright, his jaw clenched tight. "Move, Princess. Don't fight me." "Michael, stop this," Faith cried, trying to run after them. But one of the officers held her back, his face grim. "Ma'am, you can't go near him. He's dangerous right now." Dangerous. That word stabbed me deeper than the flames scorching the air. My son, once the little boy who brought me flowers he'd picked from neighbors' yards, who used to hold my hand on the boardwalk, was now a danger. And the victim of that danger was the very child I had sworn to protect with my life. The low of the moment dragged me into despair. My son wasn't just running away from justice. He was willing to take Princess, to drag her into his destruction. I stumbled forward despite the officer's protests. "Michael," I shouted, my throat raw. "You don't need to do this. Please, just let her go and face me. Face your mother, not the police. If you need to hurt someone, hurt me. But don't you dare use her as your shield." For a split second, his steps faltered. Princess looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "Daddy, I'm scared." The words broke him. I saw it in his eyes, a flicker of pain, a crack in the armor of anger and desperation. But then came the high, an explosion of action that threw the night into pure chaos. Michael shoved Princess into the boat and leapt in after her, yanking the tarp free and tossing it aside. His movements were frantic, jerky, but practiced. He knew what he was doing. With one hand, he pulled at the motor's starter cord, and the small engine sputtered, threatening to roar to life. "No," I screamed, lunging forward, only to be grabbed back by an officer. "Ma'am, you can't." "She's my granddaughter," I shrieked, tearing against his grip. The firelight glowed on the waves, turning the water blood red, as the boat rocked under Michael's weight. Princess's cries echoed over the surf. Hunter cursed and darted toward the dunes. "If that boat starts, they're gone." The officers followed, their radios crackling with urgent orders, but they were seconds too late. The motor sputtered again. Louder this time, the sound sharp and grating. Michael yanked the cord once more, and the engine roared to life. The boat jolted forward into the surf, the waves slapping hard against its hull. Faith screamed from the shore. "Michael, stop. You'll kill her." My legs gave out, and I fell to my knees in the sand, watching as the boat began to push farther and farther into the water, Princess's tiny silhouette trapped inside. And then the cliffhanger slammed down like a hammer, because just as the boat cleared the first wave, another sound tore through the night. A gunshot. The sharp crack echoed across the beach, silencing the fire, the waves, the crowd, everything. And in the faint moonlight, I saw Michael's body jolt inside the boat. The sound of the gunshot hung in the air, sharp and final, as though the ocean itself had swallowed the world whole. For a few seconds, everything froze. The waves seemed to hold their breath. The fire's crackle dulled, and not a soul on that beach dared to move. I stared, unblinking, at the boat. My mind screamed at me to see, to know, to make sense of what had just happened. Had Michael been hit? Was Princess hurt? Who had fired? The small motorboat rocked violently in the dark water. Michael slumped sideways for a second, then lurched upright, his hand clutching at his shoulder. His face twisted in pain, and he roared like a wounded animal, a sound so raw it clawed its way down my spine. Michael! Faith screamed, stumbling into the surf despite officers pulling at her arms. Michael, stop this madness. Please, you'll drown both of you. The officers shouted commands at each other, their radios bursting with static and urgent chatter. One officer knelt with his pistol still raised, his hand steady, his expression grim. He had fired the shot. He'd aimed for Michael's shoulder, not his heart, an act of restraint, of mercy. But Michael didn't see it that way. With his good arm, he yanked Princess tighter against him, her tiny frame shaking as she sobbed. The flare gun, though empty, pressed against her once more as if it were loaded. "You'll never take me alive," he bellowed across the waves, his voice hoarse and broken. The crowd on the beach murmured, gasped, wept. The fire behind us hissed and roared, feeding off the coastal winds, painting everything in a surreal orange glow. My chest ached so violently I thought my ribs might shatter. My boy, my little boy who used to sit on my lap and ask me if stars were just heaven's light bulbs. How had it come to this? The low of despair pulled me under like a riptide. I was powerless, knees in the sand, watching my family burn from the inside out. Hunter stood near me, fists clenched, eyes locked on Michael like he was ready to dive in and tear him apart with his bare hands. "Faith!" Drenched and sobbing, screamed Michael's name again and again, her voice barely audible over the crashing surf. Princess's cries were the sharpest dagger. "Grandma," she screamed, her little hands reaching toward me across the water. My heart shattered. I had promised her safety. I had promised to never let anything happen to her. And yet here she was, held hostage by her own father, trapped in a boat drifting farther into the night. The high came crashing back when Michael, one arm limp and bleeding, struggled with the motor controls. He yanked at the throttle and the boat lurched forward, cutting across the waves with frightening speed. Every second took him farther from us, farther from land, farther from the hope of stopping him. "Stop that boat," an officer shouted, waving frantically at his colleagues. "We need the Coast Guard now." Radios crackled, urgent calls flying across channels, but time felt slippery. Seconds stretched into eternities. I knew, deep in my soul, that if Michael made it too far into open water, we'd lose them both forever. And then something unexpected happened. The engine sputtered. Once, twice. The motor coughed and choked like an asthmatic gasp. The boat shuddered, slowing just a fraction, but enough for my hope to flare like the fire behind me. "Come on, God," I whispered, clasping my trembling hands together. "If you've ever listened to me, listen now. Stop that boat. Stop my boy before it's too late." Michael cursed loudly, slamming his hand against the motor. The salt water, the hurried concealment, the tarp, it had taken its toll. The engine wasn't going to last. Hunter saw the opening first. "If I can swim out there, I can reach them," he muttered, already ripping off his jacket. "Hunter, no." I grabbed his wrist, my nails digging into his skin. "The current is too strong. You'll drown before you even touch the boat." "I can't just stand here," he spat, his eyes wild. "That's my niece out there." The officers tried to stop him, but Hunter plunged into the surf anyway, his powerful strokes cutting through the dark waves. Faith collapsed beside me, screaming for him to come back, while Princess's cries grew sharper as she realized what was happening. "Uncle Hunter," she cried, reaching toward the water. Michael turned, fury blazing in his eyes. "Stay back. All of you." His voice was a mix of desperation and terror, his bloodied shoulders slick in the moonlight. He jerked Princess close, shielding her as though she were his last possession, the only thing left in his shattered world. The firelight reflected in his eyes, and for the first time, I wondered if he even saw Princess anymore, or if she had simply become a bargaining chip in his collapsing kingdom. Hunter was halfway there when Michael made a sudden, terrifying move. He yanked Princess down, forced her tiny hands onto the motor's handle, and shouted, "Drive it, Princess! Drive us away from them!" Her screams carried across the waves, high-pitched, heart-wrenching. "I don't know how. I don't know how. Do it," Michael roared, shaking her small shoulders. "You'll learn." The crowd on the beach gasped in horror. Faith fainted, collapsing into the arms of an officer. I staggered forward, my voice ragged with desperation. "Michael, she's a child. She can't save you. She can't be your way out." But he didn't listen. His world had crumbled too far, and now he was trying to drag his daughter into the abyss with him. Hunter pushed through another wave, nearly reaching the boat. The officers shouted from the shore, their guns drawn but unable to fire without risking Princess's life. The fire behind us roared higher, illuminating the scene like a theater of nightmares. And then the cliffhanger slammed down, so sharp it left me breathless. Because just as Hunter's hand reached for the boat's edge, Michael raised his free hand high above his head. In his grip was not the flare gun this time, but a jagged piece of broken glass, gleaming red in the firelight. And he held it directly against Princess's throat. The sight of that jagged glass pressed against Princess's throat nearly stopped my heart. My scream was swallowed by the roar of the waves and the crackle of the fire behind me. Time slowed to a cruel crawl, every heartbeat pounding in my ears like a war drum. "Michael, no," I cried, my voice breaking. My knees hit the sand, as if my body had collapsed under the weight of the moment. "She's your daughter, your baby girl. You can't do this." Princess sobbed, her tiny hands clutching at Michael's wrist, her face contorted in terror. She tried to twist away, but he held her firmly, the broken glass glinting inches from her soft skin. Every wave rocked the boat, making the weapon tremble dangerously. Hunter was only a breath away from reaching the boat, his arms slicing through the dark water. His teeth were clenched, his eyes wide with fury and determination. "Let her go, Michael," he shouted, spitting seawater from his mouth. "You're not taking her down with you." Michael's face was wild, his shoulder bleeding freely, his hair plastered to his forehead. His good arm trembled as he held the glass. "Stay back or I swear," his voice cracked, the words tangled in rage and desperation. The officers on shore raised their weapons, but didn't fire. One of them barked into his radio, "We have a hostage. We need the Coast Guard immediately. Repeat, we have a child hostage." The crowd on the beach was a blur of terrified whispers, gasps, and cries. Faith was still unconscious, her head resting against the sand, an officer kneeling at her side, trying to revive her. The flames from the dunes raged behind us, throwing everything into a hellish glow. The low hit me like a tidal wave. I had lost Michael long ago, I realized, piece by piece, choice by choice, lie by lie. But Princess, she was still innocent, still pure. And now her tiny life was hanging by a thread, depending on whether her father would choose love or destruction. I clasped my trembling hands together and whispered, "God, please take me instead. Don't let it be her." Hunter lunged forward, reaching for the boat. Michael jerked the glass tighter against Princess's throat. "One more step and she bleeds." Hunter froze, his chest heaving, the waves slamming against his shoulders. His fist shook with barely contained rage. "Michael, she's your blood. Look at her. Look in her eyes." For a moment, just a fleeting moment, Michael's grip faltered. His eyes locked on Princess's tear-streaked face. She whimpered, "Daddy, please. I don't want to die." Those words should have broken him. They should have pierced through the madness like sunlight through storm clouds. I saw his expression soften, his jaw slacken, as if he remembered who he was supposed to be. But then, the high came crashing back with terrifying force. Michael's eyes hardened again, and he bared his teeth in a snarl. "If I can't have her, none of you will," he screamed. With his free hand, he shoved the throttle forward, the motor coughing and roaring, propelling the boat farther into the surf. Hunter clung to the side of the boat, trying to haul himself up. Michael kicked out viciously, his foot slamming into Hunter's chest. Hunter lost his grip, and was swallowed by a wave, disappearing beneath the black water. Hunter! I screamed, staggering to my feet. My voice tore through the night. Somebody save him. The officers shouted for backup, but my eyes never left the boat. Michael stood at the helm, the broken glass still at Princess's throat, his face twisted in triumph and madness. "You'll never stop me," he roared. "This ends my way." The fire behind us flared, the heat pushing even the closest onlookers back. Smoke rolled across the beach, thick and suffocating, mixing with the salt air. The scene felt apocalyptic, the house of lies literally burning. My son lost to the flames of his own greed, and my granddaughter at the mercy of it all. Then came the next wave of horror. Hunter burst back to the surface, gasping and coughing, his eyes blazing. He had lost ground, but not his resolve. "I'm not letting you take her," he shouted, his strokes growing furious as he cut through the water once more. Michael roared, his face red, veins standing out on his neck. He yanked Princess tighter against him, the jagged glass trembling as the boat rocked. "Back off, Hunter, or she dies." Princess cried harder, her little voice cracking. "Grandma, help me, Grandma." Those words shattered me. My body moved before my mind could stop it. I lurched forward into the surf, the cold water slapping against my legs. "Michael, stop this madness," I shouted, my voice carrying across the waves. "Look at me. I am your mother, the woman who carried you, who fed you, who gave you life. If you must take someone, take me. Let her go and take me instead." For the first time, Michael's face wavered. His arms shook violently, the glass lowering an inch as he stared at me. His lips trembled. You betrayed me, Mother. You ruined everything." Tears poured down my cheeks. "I saved you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I saved you from becoming worse. I saved you from rotting in your own lies. And I'll save her, even if it costs me my life." The beach fell silent except for the roar of the fire and the crash of the waves. Even the officers lowered their weapons slightly, sensing the fragile thread holding us all together. Michael's breathing grew ragged. His eyes darted from Princess to Hunter to me. He was unraveling, torn between rage and heartbreak, between love and madness. And then, the cliffhanger struck like a blade. Michael suddenly released Princess, not to let her go, but to shove her violently into the water. Her scream pierced the night as her small body splashed into the waves. Hunter surged forward, diving toward her. The officers shouted. Faith, newly conscious, wailed her daughter's name. And Michael, bleeding and wild-eyed, gunned the motor once more, steering the boat straight out into the dark horizon alone. The splash was louder than the gunshot had been. It cut through the screams, through the roaring fire, through the chaos of the night. My granddaughter, my sweet princess, was gone from the boat and swallowed by the waves. No, the scream ripped from my lungs like an animal's howl. My legs moved before I knew what I was doing. The cold bite of the Atlantic slammed into me, dragging at my clothes as I stumbled deeper into the surf. Princess, hold on, baby, hold on. Hunter was already in motion, his powerful strokes tearing through the black water. He dove beneath the surface where Princess had gone under. Seconds stretched into eternities. My heart pounded, so hard I thought my chest would explode. Every fiber of me wanted to dive in after them, but the undertow tugged at my legs like greedy hands. The officers shouted from the beach, their flashlights darting wildly across the water. The low dragged me into despair. I couldn't see her. I couldn't hear her. My granddaughter was somewhere in the dark ocean, her small lungs filling, her cries silenced by the waves. I thought of her laugh, the way she liked to braid my hair with clumsy fingers, the way she'd curl up next to me on the porch when we watched the sun set over the Carolina coast. Had I lost her? Had I failed her? Come on, Hunter, I whispered, choking on sobs. Don't let her go. Please, God, don't let her go. Then, suddenly, the hive burst across the surface. Hunter erupted from the waves, gasping for air. Princess's tiny body clutched in his arms. She coughed violently, choking up seawater as he held her above the surface. I've got her, he shouted, his voice raw but triumphant. I've got her. The beach erupted into cries of relief. The officers surged into the water to meet them, waiting out until they could grab Princess from Hunter's arms. Her little chest heaved as she coughed and sputtered, her eyes wide with terror. But she was alive. My knees gave way, and I collapsed into the surf, sobbing with gratitude. Faith shrieked her daughter's name, stumbling forward with outstretched arms as officers carried Princess back to shore. She wrapped her trembling body around the child, holding her so tight it looked as though she'd never let go again. Princess buried her face in her mother's neck, still sobbing, her tiny hands clinging desperately. I crawled onto the wet sand, my tears mixing with the salt water. Relief flooded me, but it was jagged, laced with fury, because as my eyes lifted back to the horizon, I saw him. Michael. The boat cut across the water, the engine coughing, but still carrying him farther into the darkness. His figure stood hunched, one arm dangling uselessly, blood dripping into the sea. He was alone now. He had thrown away his daughter, his family, his last shred of humanity. The officers shouted into radios, their voices frantic. "We've got the child safe, but the suspect is escaping eastbound. Repeat, suspect is fleeing by boat." The crowd on the beach roared with outrage. Some cursed his name, others wept. The flames from the dunes burned higher, smoke billowing into the night sky, the whole scene painted in apocalyptic firelight. The low returned, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the shrinking silhouette of my son, my heart torn in two. Part of me still wanted to scream for him to turn back, to beg him to come home, to let me hold him the way I once did when nightmares woke him as a boy. But another part of me, a deeper, harsher part, knew there was no coming back from this. He had crossed every line, burned every bridge. He wasn't just lost, he had chosen the darkness. Hunter staggered onto the shore, coughing up seawater, his chest heaving from exhaustion. His eyes blazed with fury as he glared at the horizon. We should have let them shoot him. He's a rabid dog, and he'll keep biting until he's put down. "Hunter," I whispered, my voice trembling. I wanted to argue, but deep down I feared he was right. Princess whimpered softly in Faith's arms, her little body shaking uncontrollably. Faith rocked her back and forth, her sobs muffled against her daughter's wet hair. "It's okay, baby, mommy's here. You're safe now. You're safe." But the truth was, none of us felt safe. Not with Michael still out there, bleeding, desperate, dangerous. The high returned in the form of the fire. It had spread wildly, climbing up the dunes and reaching dangerously close to the property. Sparks rained across the deck, igniting furniture. Guests screamed as they scrambled to their cars, headlights cutting across the smoke-filled night. Officers shouted orders, ushering people away from the danger zone. One firefighter truck had arrived, its sirens wailing, men rushing with hoses to battle the inferno. But the wind fought against them, fanning the flames higher. The beach house, the very home Michael had stolen through betrayal and lies, was being devoured by fire. And I realized with a strange, shuddering clarity, it was justice. The house wasn't ours anymore. It had been tainted the moment he forged my name, the moment he thought greed meant more than family. Now the flames were cleansing it, erasing it from the earth. "Look," someone shouted. All eyes turned back to the sea. The boat was nothing more than a dark speck now, but suddenly it jerked violently to one side. The motor sputtered, coughed, and then silence. The boat drifted aimlessly on the waves. Michael staggered to his feet, waving his arms wildly as though to some unseen rescuer. His scream carried faintly across the water, lost in the crackle of the fire and the crash of the surf. The cliffhanger struck like lightning, because just as he lifted his arms again, there was a sound, low, rumbling, growing louder. A searchlight suddenly cut across the water from the east. A Coast Guard cutter was approaching fast, its massive light pinning Michael's tiny boat in its glare. And Michael, instead of surrendering, he leapt overboard, straight into the black water. The beam of the Coast Guard searchlight slashed across the waves, illuminating the chaos of the night. Michael's boat drifted uselessly, its engine dead, rocking helplessly against the push of the tide. But he was no longer aboard. His shadow had vanished into the black waters of the Atlantic. The gasp from the crowd behind me rose like a single voice. Some shouted for him to swim back, others cursed his name. My hands clawed into the wet sand as I searched the water, desperate for a glimpse of his head breaking the surface. And then there he was. Michael surged up from the depths, his arms flailing, his voice ragged as he screamed into the night. "Help me! Somebody help me!" His cries were broken, panicked, carrying none of the arrogance or venom that had filled his words just hours before. He looked small, so very small against the vastness of the ocean. The Coast Guard shouted commands through their megaphone, their cutter slicing closer. A life ring was thrown, skimming across the waves toward him. But Michael didn't reach for it. His head whipped around, his eyes wild, as though he thought some invisible enemy circled beneath him. For one piercing moment, I saw him not as the man who had betrayed me, not as the criminal who forged my name and stole my home, not as the monster who nearly drowned his own daughter. I saw my boy, 8 years old again, clutching his blanket, trembling from a nightmare he couldn't shake. My chest split open with grief. "Michael," I screamed, my voice breaking. "Take the ring. Grab it, son." His eyes turned toward me, and for the briefest second, I swore recognition passed over his face. But then, just as quickly, it twisted into something else. Defiance, pride, a refusal to surrender, even to salvation. He turned away. The Coast Guard spotlight tracked him as he struck out farther from the boat, farther from safety. His strokes were sloppy, desperate. The current dragged him east, the waves pounding harder, higher, pulling him under again and again. "Michael!" Faith's scream tore through the night, her voice hoarse from smoke and sobbing. She clutched Princess tightly, shielding her daughter's eyes, but her own gaze was locked on her brother's flailing form. "Please, please come back." But he didn't. The low swallowed him. One moment his head bobbed above the waves, gasping, fighting. The next gone. The water closed over him like a grave. The Coast Guard cutter roared forward, men scanning, lights sweeping desperately across the surface. Seconds passed. Then minutes. My nails dug into my palms, so hard they drew blood. Every part of me wanted to believe he'd surface again, that he'd claw his way back to air. But he didn't. The announcement came grim and final over the cutter's loudspeaker. "Subject is submerged. Initiating recovery search." Not rescue. Recovery. The word hit me like a fist to the gut. The high came strangely in the stillness that followed. The fire on the beach still crackled, but the screaming had ebbed into silence. People stared at the water with blank faces, as though the ocean had swallowed not just a man, but every ounce of fight left in them. The Coast Guard vessels circled, divers preparing to enter, but the truth was already written in the waves. Michael was gone. I fell to my knees in the sand, my body shaking with sobs that ripped me apart. Grief poured out of me, raw, jagged, unstoppable, for the boy he had been, for the man he had become, for the son I had lost long before the ocean claimed him. But mingled with that grief was something else. Relief. Princess was safe. Faith was safe. I was safe. His reign of terror had ended, not by my hand, not by the law, but by the sea itself. The very waves he thought he could outrun had claimed him. And with his disappearance beneath the water, the chains he had wrapped around us finally snapped. Hunter knelt beside me, his strong arm wrapping around my shoulders, steadying me as I wept. "He made his choice, Gina," he said quietly. His voice was heavy, not cruel, but firm. "Some men can't be saved, no matter how much you want to save them." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that Michael had been my boy, my flesh, my blood. But deep down, I knew Hunter was right. My son hadn't drowned in the Atlantic that night. He had drowned years ago when greed took root, when lies became his truth, when betrayal became easier than love. The Coast Guard divers went under, their flashlights slicing through the depths. Hours passed, though it felt like years. When at last they surfaced, they shook their heads. The tide had taken him. His body would wash up eventually, they said, maybe miles from here. Maybe never. It was over. The beach house collapsed inward as the fire devoured it, the flames glowing against the dawn that crept over the horizon. By morning, all that was left was a smoldering skeleton, smoke curling into the sky. The house Michael stole with fraud and lies was nothing more than ash. Faith held Princess tightly as the girl finally drifted into exhausted sleep against her shoulder. Her tears had dried, but her eyes were hollow, haunted. "What do we do now, Mama?" she whispered. I looked at her, at my granddaughter, at the friends and neighbors who had stayed behind to comfort us, and I realized something powerful. We rebuild, not the house. Wood and stone could be replaced, or maybe never replaced at all. No, what we would rebuild was stronger. Trust, family, love. Because Michael had nearly destroyed those things, but he hadn't succeeded. He never could. I stood tall, wiping my tears, my gaze fixed on the horizon where the ocean still churned. My voice came steady, quiet but resolute. We live, we love, and we never, ever let darkness win again. The high closed the story, not with revenge, not truly, not with anger, but with survival, with hope, because in the end that was the true revenge. We had survived him, and he was gone,